All right. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. I hope everybody is well. So we see we got quite a few people in already. You know, I guess whenever guest to the show, Torraine Walker, shows up, brothers come through. So I'm glad to see it. So like I said, we got 120 watching. Hit the like button, like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel so we can continue to bring you this independent black male thought. Where I'm grateful that brothers are willing to come through and share their thoughts, particularly ideas and thoughts that don't get mainstream press. So I like to do that here, and I'm glad that and grateful that brothers support. Shout out to Tim Indigo, what's good? We got Malika Aquateki, what's happening? Officer Faulkner in the building, what's going on? Barry, what's up? Appreciate Barry's work, sharing the info on the show. Got Artisan in the house. If you haven't, check out Artisan MC's recent review of Equalizer 3, starring Denzel. I'll be going to see it tonight for the second time. So I can recommend it. I enjoyed it. But check out Artisan MC if you're ready for a review of the film. Support his channel, subscribe, all that good stuff. So shout out to Artisan in the building. Mark, what's good with you? Appreciate you representing as well. We got Prince in the house. What's up? Freddie, what's going on? Black Toxic Masculinist. Hey, Rue in the building. Master REB, what's up? John, Joshua, Jaime, we got a lot of folks in the building, right? Brotherly Love, what's up, D? Brother Muwada, always good to see you in here, man. Shout out to Barry for the first donation of the show. Please follow suit and support so we can continue to do this. What's up, Cameron? Yeah, a lot of folks in the building. Spain, man, what's up? Ian dropping that information and supporting the show as usual. Much appreciation to Ian for that. Thank you. So we getting it in, next one up for the donation. Shout out to Wrench Turner. What's good with you, man? Appreciate that support as usual. Always coming through and supporting, as it were. So let me just, I'm going to keep some of the preliminaries to a minimum. Shout out to Southpaw. What's up? So support the show. We got SL. Appreciate that donation. The super chat. You can do so through Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Patreon. You can also become a member of the channel right here on YouTube. There's a lot of ways to support the show. You can become a patron and support not only the Onyx Report here on YouTube, you can also support the Institute for Black Male Studies. You can buy some gear, some merchandise on that website, instituteforblackmalestudies.com. So a lot of ways to support. Hey, Ruin the building with the support. Appreciate that. It says septum symptoms. Damn. I think brothers have been ready for this. Let's see. Shout out to Beretta. Says it's time to cook. Growth Talk with Kofa. Y'all support Growth Talk with Kofa. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out what he's talking about. Let me see. Uh-oh. Let's see. My guest came back through. There we go. All right. So let me just say this last thing. You can also go ahead and support. Shout out to Keith for the pick, but support the new book, Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry, Flat Blackness, and Black Male Death. The Black Masculinist Turn is available. It is out, and there is. If I don't know if they. Let me see if it's still going, but they had a discount going for back to school. And yeah, and it is still going. So the book is 20% off. The link is in the description box. I will put it in the chat so that you can support the book. Indigo said he ordered it. I appreciate that. For those of you who already have, much appreciation for the support. But go ahead and check it out, so you can see the culmination of what we've been talking about on this channel and related channels like BGS Sidmore, Green Gorilla, Dr. Ronald Neal, Dr. Thunder, and many others. The work we're doing. I tried to consolidate and just kind of put it in one place, especially in relation to the Black male political agenda. So check out the book, support that. Shout out to Aquateki for the support. It says perhaps it's a subconscious plea to be tamed like unruly cattle. They definitely waiting on Brother Torraine to come in and drop this off. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and bring in Torraine. What's good with you, man?
Hey, Dr. Johnson, how you doing, brother? I'm good, man. It's been an interesting week, man, since I dropped that video.
They waiting on you, man. They wait. I'll admit, when I first heard, I was like, "What the hell is this?" The first time I heard you drop it on Twitter, man, and I watched it, I was on the floor, bro. I was on the floor, and I'm saying that also as a professor because a lot of people underestimate when these ideas hit the students long before they become mainstream in the larger society. I see it on the college campuses. I see how it affects everything from how they dress, how they present themselves, the arguments they make. And so I've seen this for years, but I never named it. I just kind of, I looked at it and was like, all right, here we go again. You know what I mean? But once you put it together, man, you just had me crying every time you talk. And you did this for the longest. You'd just be like, see, more proof, more proof. The theory reigns again. And I was just like, this is hilarious. But if you will, if you don't know, Torraine Walker is a longtime friend of the show. He's willing. If he's willing, he's able to come through whenever he wants to. So much appreciation to him. Talk to the audience and tell them what this theory has to do with and how you came up with it.
Well, the way I came up with it was, I'm pretty active on social media, Twitter especially, but other platforms as well. And most of my baseline is I try to talk about things. And I try to uplift Black men. I try to uplift all of us as Black people, but my special focus is Black males. And I saw a particular form of narrative and I saw particular theories being pushed on social media about Black males. The usual suspects, that we're misandrous. I mean, we're misogynist, that we want to be patriarchs, that we want to have control. And we're only concerned about straight Black men and nobody else when we know that's not the case. And we have data to back that up. But I kept seeing these narratives going over and over to the point where it almost became like a mantra that certain people would say these things. And I just happened to notice that every time I saw this, I would look and see who was talking about it. And it was usually somebody who was in grad school or somebody who was in gender studies.
Right.
And then I would look at their picture, and 9 times out of 10, it would be somebody with a septum ring or the metallic studs between their nose and everything. So I started it out just to have fun and poke fun at it as a satire. Like every time I would see this, I'd be like, here we go again, septum ring theory. And then it became a thing where like every time I would see this, I go like, here, the theory strikes again. And people would either get mad or they would give me more gibberish or they would just completely block me. But they would never refute what I said. So it just became a shorthand to say, if you want to hear some, misogynistic gibberish about Black men and you want to know where it's coming from, it comes from the septum ring. So here go the theory again. So it just became like shooting ducks at the fair. I just was like, here we go again. Here's another one. And people kept asking me to flesh it out. And I would never do it because I had other stuff going on. But then when I saw the video that kind of went viral a couple of days ago, I said, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to solidify this and codify it into something so people can understand what it is. So That's why I made that video.
Okay. All right. What kind of no? Before I play the clip, I do want to know what kind of resistance have you gotten? Like, what do they say when they come at you?
You know, there's like three or four sentences that I know I'm going to always automatically get when I do this. It's going
Oh,
to be, "You hate black women. Just say you hate black women and go." That's kind of like their go-to.
hmm
If I don't get that, then what I get is a lot of seven-syllable gibberish that I call it, that they get out of the academy, where it's like they use terms where they're talking about intersectionality, or they're talking about patriarchy and these sorts of things, which does have a place when you're talking about certain things, but not in the things that I'm talking about. And it's not an argument that you can push back against but about the things that I'm saying. Because if you're looking for me to qualify what I'm saying, how come you don't have to qualify what you're saying when you're using all this rhetoric that doesn't have any basis in data and facts? So those are two things. The other one is when they start going into like ad hominem links, and then they start going into just personal attacks, which I can usually ignore. Or if I try to do them back, then they usually go. So those are the four go-tos that they go with.
it's interesting to me how codified it is. That's what's getting me. But without further ado, let me see if I can bring this up, and we can go ahead and watch you break this down.
Talk about septum ring theory. For the record, I created the term. Like most ideas that don't do the community any good, they started here, in academia. Or as I like to call it, wackademia. There's a strain of the humanities and in certain threads of feminism that label all males, regardless of their socioeconomic status, as predators or potential predators or patriarchs. These theories mostly stayed in the academic sphere until the 1980s, when certain materials and certain books and movies began to move these ideas out into the wider world. Even then, they didn't gain a lot of credence because only certain people saw that material. What changed the game was this. The rise of social media, and this app in particular, created a perfect storm of celebrity obsession, stan behavior, anonymous fan art, so academia could easily fall into those spaces and begin to proliferate because you could say these things anonymously without any backlash. With the decline of that app, a lot of people who believed in these things began to migrate to different platforms, especially this one in particular. The danger here was those crack brain ideas were beginning to mix in with real ideas that tied into like actual social justice work. And the problem now is to try to extricate those ideas from real work and real credible theories. These hateful septum ring theories are so intertwined with theories that may be beneficial to the collective that it's almost impossible to separate them. But you can be sure that whenever you hear a crack brain theory, it's usually being said by somebody with a septum ring. You think I'm exaggerating? Take a look. Septum ring. Septum ring.
Pro-black black men are
Septum ring. Are you getting the idea? So to sum up, septum ring theory is really just anti-black misandry glossed over with some seven-syllable words that make people sound good. And because the majority of people who sell this gibberish are melanated, it gives them cover. So they're not considered anti-black, and they can cover themselves with a veneer of pro-blackness.
You know what? I don't.
Oh Lord.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Now this is actually something I was thinking about earlier. You know, when Man Friday drops, he said, "Don't forget about the blue and green hair." And you know, I'm so tempted. I mean, I'm naturally resistant to stereotyping, but it's amazing to me sometimes how consistent it is. Whether it's the multicolored hair, the shaved one side,
Mm-hmm.
the $7 or seven syllable words you talk about. All of those things seem to go hand in hand. And in the moment I see purple hair shaved on one side with a septum ring, it's amazing to me how consistently I see the same kinds of statements. I'm like, where do they mass manufacture this? Outside of the academy, that is. I don't know, but it's so consistent, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and here's the thing. You know this, and I know this. The academy or certain fields in academia, the humanities, especially gender studies,
Mhm.
and to a greater extent, black studies has basically become this now, where the goal isn't so much about learning, and it's not even about the idea of like kicking different ideas around and testing these ideas to see what's valid and what's not. It's about believing into a certain orthodoxy, almost like, and I described it on another show. It's almost like having to be forced to believe Catholic orthodoxy during the time of the Inquisition. And if you did not adhere to that orthodoxy, you were
Right.
branded a heretic, and
Right.
you were, you were literally burned at the stake then, but now you're financially or academically burned at the stake now. It's some of the same sort of same sort of energy floating around. And here's what's sad about it. There are really valid conversations that deserve to be had between like black men and black women when we talk about patriarchy and we talk about misandry and misogyny.
Yes.
The issue is the absolute worst people are leading those conversations, and they're leading them with half truths, and they're leading
Yes.
them with things that were handed down to them where they don't even understand the origins of the things that they say they believe in, which is why, like in the video, I made a point of putting out Real Cool and pulling and showing out the dialectic of sex by Shulamith Firestone, which is where a lot of this idea that black men want to be patriarchs comes from. You can go back further and say it came from, the 1890s and the 18th, from almost back to the Seneca Conference, where there was the drift between like Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony about the role of women in the rights movement and everything. These things are old conversations, but unfortunately, they're given a new veneer because you have people who look like us and people who are melanated and black women who are pushing these ideas, and it's harder to push back against them because people can automatically fall back on, well, these are black women, so they automatically must be right. Not saying that you can get misquoted and you can also have corrupted text no matter who you are. You know what I mean?
Right. No, definitely. I can say though, what else I've seen go with this, because it seems like the septum ring becomes a visual marker of a kind of culture in and of itself that you're pointing to. Because a couple of things I've seen go with it. I tend to see, this kind of pushback against any kind of traditional sexuality, right? I tend to see this kind of, this kind of assumption that heterosexuality, for that matter, is limited and problematic. So you have this kind of free flowing idea about what sexuality seems to be that kind of comes with this, as well as if we take it on to religious or spiritual terms, there's also this tie to whatever is non-traditional, whether we're talking about some kind of witchcraft or whatever. It goes with the black lipstick. I mean, it's like as somebody referred to in the comment section, I think it was Officer Charles, it's almost this kind of starter kit that kind of, it almost looks like it comes in the mail. Like, you got to be a witch, you got to wear black lipstick, you got to shave one side, you got to have purple lipstick, you got to have a girlfriend as a woman. It's amazing to me how much these things tend to happen, and yet you're not supposed to call any attention to it. Now, obviously, all those other things are not always the case, but more often than not, we see remnants of the same kind of ideas. And as you pointed out, the reference to people like Bell Hooks, shout out to Dr. Thunder in the building. It's good to see you, man. Yeah. So do you notice those kind of dynamics too, or what else do you see?
Oh, absolutely. You definitely see certain social markers and you see certain cultural and um, in-group markers that you see in these things, whether it's the septum ring is sort of like the main indicator. But
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the granny glasses or the cat eye glasses, the purple hair, the blue hair, the black lipstick is a given. And you absolutely, regardless of whatever your sexuality or your gender identity is, you absolutely have to have a partner who is not black, because that's almost the same thing too. It's like, yeah, I mean, let's be real with you now. We've seen it now. It's like you're pro-black on one side, but you're sleeping with Chad on the other. And I'm not trying to knock
Oh,
anybody for who you date, but at the same time, if you're going to talk all this stuff and you're going to be so critical about the black community, wouldn't it make sense to find a partner who actually is black?
that's interesting to me because, again, especially in this era of pronouns and whatnot, I see a lot of that going on, especially with this group. And you killed me with the granny glasses. Man, I forgot about that one, but it's amazing how consistent that is. But even amongst them, you hear all these pronouns and everything that kind of points to this kind of sliding sense of sexual expression. But white men, in particular, seem to be a constant. Am I missing something there?
I think what it is the people, like I said earlier, the people who who lead these conversations, 9 times out of 10, if you really do a deep dive into their backgrounds, you'll find that they did not grow up around a lot of other black people,
Uh-oh.
or they're coming from outside the country where they don't have a cultural understanding of what some of the stressors that are against black men and black women who are in this country. So I think when you come here or you're not connected to the culture, you're in this you're in this battle with yourself trying to figure out where you belong. And a lot of times you gravitate to whatever feels trendy, you gravitate to whatever, sounds good, you gravitate to whatever evaluates or validates your sense of insecurity, or try to find something to figure out your way of belonging. And some of this stuff is really not new. It's just the things that kids
Mhm.
have always done where you're young and you're trying to figure out your place in the world and where you belong in it. It's
Mhm.
just that now there's so much literature out there, and there's almost a full orthodoxy that you can buy into in academia that will help support you even while you're dealing with your confusion and trying to figure out who you are, that you
Mhm.
don't really have to examine that, because wherever you go, whatever misstep you make, there's a literature, there's a bell hooks book, or there's a Michelle Wallace that's right there to help kind of basically wrap their arms around you, and you can say that everything's okay, you're fine like you are, which is true. But you need to still try to figure out who you are before you can say you're fine like you are. And
Mhm.
don't try to get out here and proselytize to people who already know who they are and who deal with these things every day.
Mm.
That's
Damn.
just my opinion.
Damn. Get it. Um, Now, one of the things I heard in the last couple of days after I saw you release this, I caught wind of a video with Tariq Nasheed where
Hmm.
he was talking about septum ring theory. And I didn't know if you had already saw it. I shot it to you. I met Tariq Nasheed on his. He asked me to come through on his video Buck Breaking, so I came, did a segment on there. I got to meet him that time. We chopped it up a little bit, but he dropped a few things on this, and I wanted to kind of play a few minutes of it for you and get your thoughts, because he went in a direction that I didn't anticipate. He caught me off guard with it, and I thought he had some very interesting thoughts. And I think it would be a great opportunity to get your thoughts on his assessment of your theory. Um,
Okay.
Let me go ahead and bring this up a little bit. So this is Tariq Nasheed talking about septum ring theory. We're going to give, we might go 7-8 minutes at the longest, but we can stop and chop it up at any moment. So just tell me to pause it if you got a reflection or something you want to observe. Just let me know. But here we
All
go.
right, cool.
Normally, the women are running around here with them septum rings. Um, Usually, these are, and it's a very interesting theory. Usually, these are a lot of women who are weirdos anyway. They look weird, they're bad built. So they have to try to seem more spiritual and this esoteric than what they are. And they also have to have things that distract from how weird they look, or they try to throw stuff on to kind of almost accentuate the weirdness about them. So the septum ring, the tongue ring is just quirky tattoos.
Oh, we forgot the tongue ring and the tattoos. I don't know how I forgot that, but they go right there with the granny glasses. So you're right. He's right.
Mhm.
And but usually the septum ring is usually a telltale sign of one of these babbling plebiscite bedwenches or a tether feminist. And that whole thing where it's almost a form of self mutilation, but it's them trying to seem exotic in order to cover for their basically anti-black mindset, because most of those women usually are bedwenches, and many of these bedwenches, they have to try to seem extra herbal tea-ish to compensate for their subliminal hatred of black society. That's why they're always they not just only attack black men, they attack the black women who are doing things to uplift the black community. That's why they will attack our Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. They don't like black society at all. So all of that septum ring bullshit, that's for Zaddy, to be honest.
Mm.
Let's can we get deep for a minute? Can we get deep for a minute, family? Do we got time? Give me a thumbs up if y'all want to get deep. Let's get real deep with this. Notice the septum ring mammies and feminists, about 98% of them are bedwenches. I would damn near say 99.9 of them are bedwenches. So when they get with Zaddy, everything has to be almost African tribal looking with them Take a real good look at them damn bed wenches. That's a version of bone in the nose. You dig? It's almost like slave play
Mm.
because the white boys they like the women to look wild and tribal. You know, when the white boys get a bed wench, they want the hair to be fucked up. That's why the bed wenches be having the janky wig and the lace fronts be all fucked up. Um, the white boys like that. They like them looking raggedy and tribal, like they just came out of some damn tribe in Sierra Leone somewhere.
Let's talk about
So
that a
the
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't agree with everything he said, but what I will say is this. It's kind of like I said earlier. When you see people who are pushing a lot of these agendas and you see people who are moving a lot of this sort of theory that isn't connected to black people all the time, you will see that 9 times out of 10, like I said, they either did not grow up around other black people or they come from cultures outside of Black American culture. So again, unfortunately, for the first one, if you don't know where to put your foot, then it's rough and it's hard for you to kind of like figure out where you belong. And it's also kind of hard for you to really identify with people and the systemic racism and the systemic abuse that black people in America have dealt with. That's the first thing.
Mm.
The other part is if you're from here, I mean, if you're not from here, I don't care who you are, where you come from. The first message that you get when you land on these shores is that you need to stay away from African Americans, or that African American culture and whatever they got going on is basically lower than the people you need to try to align yourself with. And that happens a lot. And a lot of times people who come here and they say that when they're telling the truth, you hear a lot of that. As far as like the particular thing about the physical attributes, I do know that when you see people who are in relationships, sort of like this picture that you see, 9 times out of 10, they tend to be a lot more understanding of the culture that they cleave themselves onto than anybody else. And you barely see them, even when they claim to be pro-black and they're talking about anti-black racism,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times they never get to the real core of what created those mentalities and what created the conditions that black people in America are dealing with. So what you get when you talk to these people is really surface level stuff, and you get surface level analysis. And also a lot of it too is tied to the divester mentality, where a lot of their
Yes.
politics is tied to not identity politics, but it's desirability politics. There's another word you can use for that I won't use on your show, but it really comes down to desirability politics and the fact that the people who they assume that will find them attractive don't find them attractive. So they go to the people who will tolerate them or will tell them that they're attractive. And instead of dealing with that internal trauma, they externalize it and they push that onto every other person. So the fact that you've been rejected by one black man means all black men reject you. The
Oh.
fact that one black man said your skin tone is not what he wants, that means all black men assume that. You know what I mean? They don't really do a deep analysis of their own internal biases, and they try to sell it to everybody else. And again, there's an apparatus set up in academia and set up in a lot of these gender studies programs, and unfortunately, a lot of the corrupted black studies programs to basically support everything they'd say. So, and that's where we are.
Well, shout out to Malika. He said something I put up on the screen a minute ago, where he's talking about let's not forget about sexual experimentation, pansexuality, bi, non-binary. He talks about, the association of that as part of that culture we were pointing to. And I got to say, I've seen that as well. But I think the thing that really drew me to Tariq's kind of assessment was I had not considered the relationship between what you're referring to in regard to septum ring theory and exotification and this kind of interest in white men, that kind of linkage of those three things alone. He makes this, as we just heard, this assessment, that some of this has to do with, attracting white men and white men's interest in really exoticizing black women as these kind of, jungle idea. Is there any merit to that in your assessment?
Well, I can't speak to every case, but I
Right.
do
Of course.
know that if you listen to some of the conversations and some of the backstory on some of these people, I think there is an element of that in quite a few of them. I
Mm,
think there's also an element of sour grapes, if I have to say it any other way.
mm,
I think a lot of people who believe in a lot of these theories, like I said earlier, they when you look at your skin in the mirror,
mhm,
I think it's an instinctual trait to expect, if you're interested in trying to find somebody to partner with, somebody who looks like you.
mhm,
But if you've been told that, your skin is undesirable,
Mm-hmm.
or the people who look like you are less than. I think what happens a lot of times is you try to go outside of that peer group and try to find anybody who will find you desirable.
Mm.
So I think that's part of it as well. I think some of it is just really deep trauma that needs to be worked out in therapy. But
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of these people will not go to therapy, and like I said, there's an apparatus that basically supports them in anything they do, so they don't have to feel like they're doing anything wrong.
Mm.
Instead of doing any kind of self-reflection, this kind of anger and this kind of bitterness goes out into the wider world. And all you got to do is listen to how they respond to anybody who challenges them. I see it all
Yeah.
the time. If
Yeah.
I say anything that pushes back against some of these theories about black men being patriarchs or black men being predators in the community, when I have data that shows that this is not the case, and we have data that comes from Pew Research and it comes from white people's data, so they should be able to support that, that shows that black men tend to be the most progressive and the most welcoming group of men in the United States when it comes to gender identity or even gender equality. But that goes out of the window when you try to show them that, because their mentality and their religion, so to speak, doesn't have to be connected to data. So automatically you react to it in a harsh manner.
Mm-hmm. You know, I gotta say, in the '90s, before I got married, the sister, even on the screen, gorgeous to me. You know, this was you know, because it was particularly hard to find women that were into wearing their hair naturally. You know what I mean? And to this day, if I see another weave, it gives me a headache. It's just all over the place. The blonde weaves, the blue contacts, all that mess really just annoys me. So again, in the '90s, I was looking for this, and when I started to see this kind of rise in what we're talking about, especially in the latter 2000s, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand where it was coming from, because there was already what I perceived to be a very small subset of women that wore their hair naturally that I thought was attractive. Now I had to deal with this kind of misandrist culture that was coming out of this, and I didn't understand where it was coming from. Um, you know, did you see that shift earlier than the last couple years?
No, not really, because you're absolutely right. There used to be an unspoken code that when you saw a sister with her hair natural and she was, had tattoos like this, or she had a septum ring, that you could understand that, this is a sister who was Afrocentric.
Mm-hmm.
She might be connected to her culture. And if you were on the same wave, this was somebody you might need to think about as partnering with, or somebody you can maybe build something with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, I'd say maybe the last 3 or 4 years, and it seems like it kind of coincided with the rise of social media, and also coincided with the whole protest movement that we had over the past 4 or 5 years, where you saw people who were dressing like that, who were moving into a lot of this rhetoric, like I said, and they were starting to see them partnering with people who were non-black, regardless of whatever their gender orientation, whatever their sexual orientation is. You started seeing that become almost a shorthand for the sort of septum ring theory that I talk about, and the sort of dating out that you see right now. And I don't know where that came from. I really don't, because I would love to really do some analysis on that. But it's weird seeing how that shifted from one to the other, to where you could not assume that somebody who looked like that would automatically be down with you as a brother. It's wild.
Yeah. Whereas a number of years ago, that you could make that assumption, and more often than not, you'd be right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of easy in a way, and now it's just kind of for me it's kind of confusing. But I'm going to play a little bit more of Tariq and get your thoughts on it. I promised Torrin that I wasn't going to hold him long, because the weekend is where brother gets to recharge. So we're not going to be here too long, but I want to play a little bit more and get his thoughts on it.
Ring kind of gives them that bone in the nose, tribal, wild, um, Maasai warrior look. You know what I'm saying? That's something that Zaddy likes. Zaddy's like, oh God, look at her. Look at her. She's all nice and ashy. She has a ring in her nose. Oh God, she's so hot. That turns white boys on. I've never, you don't see brothers like, oh damn, she had a septum ring. That shit don't do nothing for us. That's some shit white boys like. You look more primitive and tribal with that shit. It gets them off. You know.
I'm curious, do you think there's any relationship? Because we saw this at least in three media moments. We saw this in the Black Panther movies. We saw this with oh man, Lovecraft Country. We saw this with The Woman King. Do you think any of those kind of productions, this kind of generic relationship to certain levels of African aesthetic, do you think any of that was kind of appropriated in this at all?
I can't really speak to that, because I haven't done enough research on that to really speak on it intelligently. But what I can say is this: if you go back and read the autobiography of Malcolm X,
Hmm.
There's passages in the book when Malcolm talks about his days as a pimp and talks about his days as a hustler and everything. And there is he relates this one story about this one black woman who was a sex worker, a real big muscular black woman who was coal black, who used to oil her body up and work naked. And he said that her entire clientele was rich white men.
Mm.
There were rich white men who would come from Manhattan. They'd
Hmm.
come into Harlem to come to her apartment to
Hmm.
allow themselves to be beaten by this big black muscular woman with whips to the point where they would draw blood.
Yeah.
And I've heard that story just reading the histories of a lot of black men who were either pimps or sex workers, and this is something that you see repeating itself over and over again,
Hmm.
to the point where, like, I think Iceberg Slim and Pimp talks about the same sort of thing, where some of his clientele would pay him to take him to the hood and everything to get him hooked up with a big muscular sister. And even if you look at the movie Cooley High, there's a scene in that where Stephen Williams' character hustles this old white man to take him to the projects to get with this black girl and everything. So I don't
Mm.
know. I will say that I think there is a definite strain of sexual kink that happens with a
Mhm.
lot of white men, where they want to try to get as close to maybe it's their greatest fear, or maybe it's something that they feel like they can control, which is black sexuality. And if they can't
Mhm.
do it through the male, they'll do it through the woman. And there might be a sort that sort of thing. I mean, look back, even if you go back to Regency England, where Sarah Bartman, the Hottentot Venus, quote unquote, was sort of like the original sex work,
Mhm.
not sex worker. She was sexually exploited,
Yeah,
but white men from royalty all the way down to the middle classes would pay to see this woman's naked body and see her buttocks and see her
absolutely.
vagina and her pudenda and these sort of things. So I think there's a deep-seated sexual hang up that these white men may have, that they're acting out in this way. But I do think there's something that it does need to be explored, because I feel like there is something psychological going on there.
No, I think you're definitely right. And when it came to what you just referred to, they left her body on display for what, over a century. I mean, it wasn't so what, the early 2000s where they finally released her remains back to South Africa. So that fetish, that kind of
Yeah,
what was dressed up as a scientific fetish, carried on after her death, right? And we can
yeah.
definitely see
And
this
to
kind of exoticized interest in black women's bodies. Go ahead.
Yeah, even to your point that you were talking about, like some of the content that comes out where they go into these details. You mentioned Lovecraft Country, you mentioned a couple of other things. You do see
Mhm.
this sort of like this fetishization of black female
Yes.
sexuality, and this fetishization of just black women in general. There was a play that I despise, and I'll go on record as saying as I hated it. There was a play called Slave Play that came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and
Mm.
all these all these black people who work on Broadway or work in theater or had hopes of working on Broadway were plays in this play. And the second biggest audience for this play was white women and white people who work in Broadway and work in theater, who were saying this is the greatest play that I've ever seen, and this is something that everybody needs to see. But if you talk to black people, and if you talk to black people who heard about this play, everybody was saying this is disgusting and we need to get this out. We need to get this out of the paint. So I feel like there is a thing that they try to live vicariously through these sexual acts, when
Mm.
try to live and they try to act out their greatest fear, or they try to act out whatever their sexual kink or their sexual hang up is through a lot of black people and black women. And we know the history of black sexuality and black sexual violation in America and around the
Mm.
world. So I feel like there is something that does need to be explored there. I don't think people really want to explore it, because if they do, they'd have to open up some things about themselves that they don't want to let be known
Right.
for
Absolutely.
some of the on both sides of it, the white people who participate in this and the black people who participate in it.
Oh goodness. You opening up some stuff, man. You opening up some stuff. I mean, I don't know what you anticipated when it came to coming up with this concept, but even the things that you're saying, I'm not even referring to what's all coming out of the comments, because brothers are coming up with all kinds of analysis in the comments section right now. But
Mhm.
even with some of the things you've been saying the last few minutes, did you think it could get this deep when you first kind of developed it, when you first started to notice it?
Well, my fear about this whole thing was this. Um, the whole idea about septum ring theory, when I started talking about this, it wasn't so much about just regular people who have these things and these indicators that we're speaking about. My concern was that people who were in the academy, people who are in graduate programs, who are going into like counseling, who are going into the legal field, who are going into the arts, who are going into places where they will be able to basically shape policy that affects black people and black men in particular.
Mhm.
That's what scared me, and that's why I think it's deeper than people realize. I kind of made the theory up as a form of satire, but the things that I was satiring were very dangerous, and they're very real things, because, like I said, the people who believe in this stuff are matriculating through the academy, and they're not going back on the social media. They're going into jobs where they're going to be able to hold the power of life and death over people
Get
who are
it.
in your family,
Get
people
it.
like you, people like me, people who like maybe come into their hands. And if they really automatically feel this way, and they automatically have a negative connotation about Black culture and Black life, especially Black male life, what does that say to us when we fall into the hands of these people? That's where the horror is, and that's where the danger is.
So you're talking about, theoretically speaking, the people who take off the septum ring, put on a suit, get a job, and now they're in a managerial position hiring people.
Mm-hmm.
And the same types of perspectives, attitudes, and really the same type of anti-Black misandry is still in play in a very particular way.
Yeah,
And
and they're going to think tanks if they stay in academia, where they're helping to sit in rooms where the policy is shaped that's going to affect Black people. If you have a hateful idea, and if you have a hateful point of view about the way Black people are, and your septum ring theory tells you that Black men are patriarchs no matter what they do, and if they come out the womb, which is actually a conversation that's floating around on social media right now, a conversation about Black boys, and are they socialized to be patriarchs, or do they come out of the womb that way, even when they come out of Black wombs? What does that say? How frightening is that? What does that say about the future of young Black boys who are going to fall into the hands of these people who go into education, who go into policy making? You know what I mean?
Well, you're hitting on exactly one of the things that really motivated me to do the work I'm doing, because I was in graduate school. Black feminism was taught as almost a religious norm in that sense. And it wasn't until a little bit later where I got to see how these ideas were taken out into the mainstream and what types of things happened with them, what types of assumptions about Black manhood. And then I realized retroactively, going back to the reading assignments and the courses and even the discussions that took place, that misandry was palpable, but I didn't know what misandry was at that time, and I didn't imagine that this was something that could be produced. So the more I saw it, and the more I began to realize the impact it was having, especially in different environments that I taught in, the culture of those environments. Again, especially if you're talking about the academy, we're talking about limited numbers of Black males most often, and yet this increasing hostility, particularly from Black feminists who were very much inspired by, Black gender courses, so on and so forth. This hostility for men began to really grow. And then I began to see it move into activism, move into nonprofit work, move into even the corporate realm. I even interviewed Kevin Samuels, and he talked about this kind of low boiling contempt and hostility that he noticed in the workplace, but not as much from white men or Asian men, but particularly from Black women. So for me, when I heard about, the septum ring theory, it just kind of fell in line with some of the things I've already seen. And it's really helped to create this real complex kind of almost kind of cultural war zone in a sense. But am I going too far with that?
No, I don't think you're going too far at all, because systems are created by human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're run by people. And if you want to understand how a system works, you have to understand the people who are driving that system. I mean, look what happened with the Black Lives Matter organization. And we have to be clear here.
Yes.
I have to make this distinction.
Yes.
You have to separate the Black Lives Matter movement from the Black Lives Matter organization.
Yes.
But I have to be honest with you, they've done a very good job of intertwining the two to the point where you can't extricate one from the other.
Mm-hmm.
But the Black Lives Matter organization, how did it come about? After the deaths of Black males.
Yes.
I've done the research. According to the Mapping Police Violence project, about 2,000 people, 2,000 Black people have been killed in police interactions from 2014 to 2021 is the last date, I believe. Out of that 2,000, 77 were Black women. The rest were all Black men. We're talking about almost 1,800 Black men murdered or killed.
Mm-hmm.
That organization was able to build itself off the deaths of Black males.
Yes.
But once you start getting into the rhetoric of what the Black Lives Matter organization stands for, you hear everything about gender theory. You hear everything about feminism. You hear things about, destroying what is it that they took off their mission statement, dismantling the nuclear family.
The nuclear family, yep.
All these things, they have absolutely nothing to do with why people were out marching in the streets. People were out marching in the streets because of white supremacy, police violence, and seeing their Black men get killed in the street. But I'm saying that to say that the people who directed those conversations into those channels,
yes,
are the septum ring sort of people that I'm talking about, because they were fed through the academy, through the Shulamith Firestone, Gloria Steinem, Bell Hooks, Michelle Wallace school of thought when it comes to black male thought and talking about Black men. and they have not examined that because it works for them and it is lucrative. That's the other part of it.
Well,
So why would you push back against something that gives you money?
exactly. But I think it was such a smooth takeover, though, that I don't think black folk really saw it coming. Because I can tell you, I remember "Hands Up, Don't Shoot." Right, that was the going chant. And when I
Shout out to
started,
Darren. That was Darren Seals. Shout out to the brother in
shout out
Ferguson.
to
Rest in
Darren
peace.
Steele, rest in peace to absolutely. But when I started hearing people chant Black Lives Matter, I didn't know it was an organization. It just I heard it as a chant. I thought it was the new chant. That was it. By the time people found out it was an organization, I think there was a period of grace where they just got received, right? Because we've seen movements over the last century grow up, come into play in terms of representing Black interests. So nobody, I don't think, really imagined this very specific movement kind of carrying, what would you call it? What's the term for animals like that? Leeching, kind of leeching onto parasite, being a kind of a parasite to a larger movement, but being very specifically focused in such manner that they were willing to use black male deaths to propel an idea of the Black community and the Black family void of Black men, unless of course you were LGBT. Nobody, I don't think, really imagined a Black-led organization that would do that. And it took years for people in a larger sense to really recognize and acknowledge just how far BLM took that whole philosophy. So for me, it was one of the smoothest takeovers I've ever seen, and I think it may have permanently damaged a certain type of respect that activist organizations usually would get from the Black community. I think in many ways it may have even brought up a sense of pause that we have to develop to analyze who exactly is speaking in our name, which may not be a bad thing in the end analysis, but in terms of watching it happen, it just was so smooth, man. I'd never seen that before.
Yeah. I personally think they had to have some help doing that because I've had some conversations with a few of these people, and just talking to them by myself, I know that a lot of them aren't built, they don't have the capacity to really pull some of the things off. I guarantee you it's probably something that was done with some outside actors and that sort of thing, but that's a conversation I don't know just yet. I'm just saying that's just my gut tells me that. But I'm using that as an example of the fact that if you have people who look like you, especially if we're talking about issues that affect the Black community, there's this understanding among people who are not Black that whoever is the Blackest person in the room or whoever's Black in the room needs to be leading the conversation. The danger in that is that if you don't really vet the people who are talking for you and you don't ask them some very hard, specific, direct questions about what their agenda is, it's very easy to get played and it's very easy to get hustled that way because a lot of them fall back on this thing where you can't question me because I'm a Black person. Or the thing that happens a lot in these conversations, which you're going to hear, why are you questioning a Black woman as if you're exempt from being questioned like anybody else? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think the use of Black women by white liberals has been particularly interesting in these circles because there is a funding discussion to be had, and you've had it on several different occasions in terms of your journalistic work because we all saw the funding coming into Ferguson very early on. Darren Seals talks a lot about this, the funding that came through social media that ended up not going to the people on the ground, but going into the people that kind of came into town and then disappeared with the money. That kind of liberal, dynamic was definitely happening. But even in terms of this kind of attack on Black men in regard to this culture of misandry, a lot of that I would argue has been financed by white liberals as well. And it served a very key function because we've never seen the impact of Black activism the way we did in the late 1960s. We really haven't seen that. Late 1960s and early 1970s, we haven't seen it since.
Yeah, and that's by design.
Yeah.
I talk about this a lot. Just to give the audience a real thumbnail sketch. When when academia and colleges began to get desegregated, like in the late tail end of the 60s, moving into the 70s, a lot of the scholars who were able to move into those places came out of the Black liberation sort of like ideology. A lot of those brothers and sisters that moved into college and became teachers, they came out of the the West Coast Black liberation movement or the Panthers or other people who had a Black consciousness. And a lot of the conversations that were happening across college campuses, whether it was HBCUs or whether it was white colleges like Berkeley and other places, the conversation when it came to Black issues was really Black centered and Black focused. What happened was, towards the middle of the 1970s, a lot of that conversation got usurped and moved into gender issues because feminism, mainstream feminism, began to gain precedence when we started talking about social justice on college campuses. So you had the Shulamith Firestones with the dialectic of sex. You had the Gloria, what's her name, Gloria Steinems and everything. who became very, very influential and started moving into Black activist circles and began to start separating the conversation about a unified Black struggle, about gender, about Black women or just as oppressed as every other woman. Where you have people who will tell you from that time that Black women were not oppressed by Black men, they were oppressed by white men. They
Mhm.
were oppressed by the system, and they don't want to talk about the fact that a lot of white women, their fight wasn't against the system. Their fight was against their place in the system to be co-conspirators in a worldwide system of white supremacy. That's what their fight was about. They were fighting with white men to be equal with white men to exploit everybody else. But what they did was they pulled Black women into them and say, "Come in line with us because you're a woman, and we need to have sisterhood, and we need you to fight for what we're fighting for. That doesn't mean we're going to fight for what you're fighting for. You got to come in line with us." And that's why you got that picture that famous picture of Gloria Steinem with her fist raised up with that
Ah,
other sister who I don't know how she allowed herself to get sucked into that, but her and then Gloria Steinem and this Black woman with their fist up doing this when they're fighting two different fights. And
well,
what happened was that what that did was that kind of like broke up some of the theory and broke up some of the conversations that was focused on Black issues into all these different silos.
mhm,
And it stayed that way up until the mid 1980s, where you saw the rise of Afrocentrism again, where you had like Leonard Jeffries at NYU, if I'm not mistaken. You had other scholars like, Cornel West. You had Dr. Frances Quest Welsing, who was disrespected by that woman in that TikTok video. You had John Henrik Clarke, who was still alive at that time, Jawanza Kunjufu. You started seeing a resurgence of Black nationalism and Black consciousness.
mhm,
And then when that began to happen again, what you had again was the rise of the Alice Walkers. You had
yeah,
the Terry McMillans, who wasn't even a scholar. You had the Bell Hooks. You almost had like this cadre of Black feminist scholars who were not focused on the Black collective. It was focused on separating Black women from that, to the
mhm.
point where they became the mainstream and everything else got pushed to the side, or it got marginalized and pushed out.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the dangers of the white feminist argument is it came with not only policy but material benefits. Right? It
Hmm.
came with a shift that could benefit you on a level that impacted where you lived, what you ate, access to employment. It wasn't just ideology in the sky that you decided whether you were going to be pro black or influenced by white feminists. It came with resources. So that's what greased the wheels, if you will, as far as a lot of this. And
Hmm.
I think to this day, it's one of the reasons it's still going because again, what black organization have you seen in recent years raise as much funding as BLM did? You know what I mean? Even
None.
organizations that have been around for generations, haven't come close to that in many senses. But nonetheless, this is where we are, and I think this is going to be one of the things that continues to seduce and lure, even in the academy, people into these kind of feminist spaces because they came with those kind of benefits. I mean, we saw the employment shift in the '70s where black women went from domestic work to low level white collar and continuing on from there to this current moment. We've seen that, and a lot of that was tied to white feminist promises in terms of the sisterhood union between women who were all oppressed by all men, where they didn't
Hmm.
differentiate between black and white men. And that just became a standard argument, which I think in a very simplistic manner, people can pick up and run with without much reflection.
Exactly, exactly. And I got to be honest with you, man. I talk about this a lot. This is going to continue until Black men and Black women in these spaces start fighting back.
Mm,
And I know for a fact that there are a lot of Black women and Black men who are in the academy, who are in a lot of these fields in the nonprofit world, who don't like this stuff, but they're so afraid to speak that they just let these people roll over them, or they kind of like just sit there and let these things continue to build because they're afraid of the backlash. Like I said before, remember I made the analogy between like being in the Inquisition. Like if you push back against it, you're automatically branded a heretic and you're an outcast, and you're financially burned at the stake.
mm.
You're professionally burned at the stake. But it's going to take people with courage to start pushing back against these things, because if you don't, and you roll over this, you're eventually going to be buried by it
Mm.
sooner or later.
Well, look, man, as I promised, I wouldn't go over the hour mark, so we're at 54 minutes. But I really appreciate you coming through. What else do you want people to walk away with? And maybe this can be your closing thoughts, and make sure you tell people where they can find you. But what do you want people to walk away with, and what do you want them to think about in relation to this?
What I want people to do is basically ask questions. I want you to vet everybody who's coming to you with any kind of agenda. If you are a Black person who's concerned about the well-being of Black men, Black women, Black boys, Black girls, even Black gender non-conforming people, you need to ask questions about the people who are selling you whatever rhetoric. If it doesn't sound right, ask them questions. Vet these people, ask them where they come from, and I'm not talking about their place of origin. I'm asking where they come from, as far as like, how did they pop up on the scene. Just question everybody. Just don't assume because somebody is black that they have your best interest at heart. You better question them like you would question everybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just use your discernment. That's my final question. That's my final plea. Use your best discernment. Follow your first mind.
And where can people find you, and what are some things you're working on that you want people to kind of be aware of?
You can find me, like I say all the time, you can find me on Twitter. I'm on there too damn much, but I'm on there at Torraine Walker. I'm also on TikTok. I'm going to be making new video content to make more people mad and educate the people who want to be educated and want to have some fun. All my social media is Torraine Walker, TORAINE WALKER. If you want to support my work, go to my website. You can see basically all my bylines, all the video content I've done on TorraineWalker.com. And if you want to support what I do, you can go to my Cash App that's scrolling across your screen right now, Torraine Walker. Also, I have a Patreon, Torraine Walker. Pretty much that's where you can find me if you want to support my work. But I'm everywhere. That's what I do.
All right, man. Appreciate you coming back, especially back to back, because we just got to rock a little while ago. So I really appreciate it. Y'all go support Torraine Walker. Make sure we continue to, because again, now I as far as I'm concerned, I classify him as a journalist, principally. So that's one of the things that's always drawn me to your work. So I hope that you're going to continue doing that, and I really want brothers to support you in that endeavor, because you don't find a lot of black men in journalism who are willing to speak out publicly and say the things that most are too afraid to say. So
yeah, man, we just need more people with a little bit more courage, man. If we could fight against Jim Crow, if Ida B. Wells could talk against Jim Crow with the threats of death and bomb threats, we could be able to talk to get our people in line and everything.
well, I appreciate you coming through, man. Thank you.
Much love, brother.
All right. Shout out to Torraine Walker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the link. I'm going to let a few of you come up, share your observations, try to be a little succinct so we can kind of make sure that hopefully a few people are able to come through and give their thoughts. Shout out to Sergeant Willie Pete. I see you in there, man. Good to see you. I saw you dropped something for me to look at, brother, but I've just been swamped at the beginning of the school year, so I didn't mean to ignore it. I meant to respond to you, but it's just been crazy. But appreciate you coming through. Shout out to BGS Idmore, who I saw earlier. Shout out to Dr. Ronald Neal. Anybody wants to come through and drop a word, come on up. The link is in the chat. And if not, that's cool. We can close it out. It's all good. It's Saturday. And you guys can go do your thing. So, I'll give you a minute. Let's see. We got Officer Faulkner. All right. What's good, man?
Well, technically Sergeant Faulkner, but who's counting?
Oh, Sergeant. My bad. My bad. Well, and CEO, right? Or what's the term? What's the title?
Sergeant Faulkner is my police title. Colonel is for my company.
Colonel. All right.
It's funny because I see a lot of this behavior, like I've talked on Green Gorilla's channel, similar to about this similar subject. You see a lot of this, especially in the cosplay, anime community, the comic book community, where you'll see a lot of these rhetorics where, well, we're so oppressed, this patriarchy. I'm like, wait a minute. Patriarchy is so bad, then why don't you move to a country where it's women in charge? I said, if you want to be treated as an equal to men, why don't you sign up for selective service?
Okay.
And when you start looking up for this stuff, you start to see, well, they'll date a white guy or an Asian guy, but he doesn't need to have a tenth of what a black man needs to have. And it's like I said in the chat, you'll see a lot of these chicks who will go natural, but they'll wear weaves for black men.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And let's say if they are attractive, they're going to have less requirements for that white guy than they do for the black guy. And you see it a lot. And you're like, wait a minute. You said love is love, but you're talking sugar, honey, iced tea about the black community without taking it in retrospect. And I do agree with him. Like a lot of the people who've actually spoke about this, a lot of them don't come from a culture. They either come from two cultures, either outside the country, or they grew up in this quote unquote multiculturalism thing where black culture isn't the norm, and you'll see them try to acquiesce, like the Valley Girl. And yes, Lord, shout out to Rachel True, because she was on the protective detail. surprised how many white girls love her, how many black girls love her, and they can tell you the movie The Craft from back to backward.
Wow.
And
Wow.
you'll notice that they also do a lot of this Wiccan and witchcraft stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting because people think that people don't think you could try to sell pro black and actually be anti black.
Yeah.
No,
Absolutely.
and notice you'll see where they'll talk pro black, but they really are speaking on anti black male.
Yeah, very much so. Let me see. Wait, I got Commander. Before I let you on, I just want you to know your camera's on, so decide if you want to be on screen or not before I bring you up. You good? All right. Um, okay. So let me see here. Let me put.
I manage a nonprofit, and I wanted to talk about it from a nonprofit perspective. And I
Oh, hold
sent you
on.
that paper on Facebook.
Okay, I appreciate that. Hold on one second. I want to go in order. I just wanted to let you know before I brought you up because sometimes people don't mean to have their camera on, but I appreciate you having it on. But we'll get to you in a second. So let me get to Atlanta. I don't know. I didn't mean to. I hope I didn't lose Officer Faulkner for anything I did. Anyway, Atlanta, stay fine. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes. I'm hearing some echo in the back though. Can you turn your stuff down?
I'm sorry about that. Sorry, but I had the TV on and everything. I want to definitely add to some of the things that Torrin was talking about earlier.
Okay.
Definitely to the point and everything. I guess for me, being in Atlanta, going back to the early part of the '90s, the nose ring thing was really based upon around people, like I said, with that more of an Afrocentric taste and more of the social thing. But uh, around like 1996, what I began to see was everybody within the culture and everything started running towards this bisexual thing. I think this kind of really ties into the point, some points that Turin was making, because it's just like what he kind of talked about before. Whereas the people who weren't actually in the in crowd are the ones that weren't really actually a part of just certain groups. They actually started getting more involved in this bisexual thing, and when that took place, it created a point everything. Whereas women were really took this really strong because they wanted to be more to the in crowd, and that's when you saw more of an influx of women to the point everything getting in relationships. They wanted there were women that were getting involved with women they didn't even like women, but most of all, they just wanted the access, and the access created an area whereas they had access to white men, women, and all this attention. So all the women who did not had that kind of attention in high school or college or within their jobs or in the industry, and like around 1996, I said a major influx of different point right there. Whereas with the bisexual craze, when they hit Atlanta, from a worldwide standpoint, what's the point, like I'm saying, to the point where you see so many people and everything, to the point, I'm sorry, women, particularly and everything, really got involved in this because they would really wanted more access and more attention.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Ian, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's good?
What's good, man? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad you had the show when you was addressing this. I kind of wrote something recently, or I kind of addressed something recently. I think part of what the issue is when we're talking about black women is that
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Ian, can you hear me?
can you hear me?
You borged out. It kind of blacked out.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. What were you saying?
Okay. No, I think that essentially, I think black women are looking at black men as regressive, and basically, I think they think that we want to keep them in slavery, in a position of slavery,
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm.
And the reason I'm saying that is because black women tie their freedom to identity, right?
Okay.
The one time this black female civil rights activist, she was on this TV show, right? It was a morning talk show, black morning news talk show, and she said the reason that she thinks racism still exists is because white men do not find black women attractive. So I think essentially the issue is that black men do not give black women the sense of cosmopolitan ability to move around in the world socially, and I think that they have this disdain for black men because black men cannot give them that ability to move around in this cosmopolitan manner as far as their identity goes. We can't basically upgrade their identity. And so I think they have a hatred for us because of that. And essentially, I think that they think that freedom comes with attachment to the white man, because attachment to the white man means now I have this cosmopolitan ability to basically operate anywhere in the world through this white man.
Yeah.
And I think that this idea of the black man, basically in a lot of cases being traditional, I think, and not really trying to move out socially, I think they think is slavery essentially. And I think again, I think they think freedom is through their identity and through their social relationships. But black men understand, as we battle white supremacy all this time, a lot of times we are traditional because we want to protect our families. We don't want our women going out being this cosmopolitan being, because what does that entail? That invites white men to abuse them. So I think that they have this idea that our protection is abuse and slavery, and the white man means freedom because now she can move around in terms of her identity freely and be respected.
So how much, in your assessment, how much more frustrating is it that black men are able to move around in the world in a way differently from black women, especially in the last 6 months? We've seen, I think I've seen people terming it passport girl failures or something along that line. And we've seen black women internationally being rebuffed in a way that you don't generally hear about black men grappling with. We have our own issues, but it's not quite what we've been seeing. So do you think that has been exacerbating some of the frustration that you're hearing?
Yeah, of course. There's a jealousy. You know what I'm saying? There's a pure jealousy that black men are able to do that. I mean, essentially, we've done that historically. I mean, when you talk about us being in the military and so on and so forth, and being looked at as a potential mate, you know, worldwide. You know what I'm saying? I think black women have been jealous of that, and I think they think that, okay, we don't want them to do the same because we don't want them to have the freedom of movement to be able to move around in the world and be respected in that way. But they don't understand. They don't understand that they don't see that their reputation and their image is not the same as ours. I mean, essentially, the black, you know, and I wrote this on a post. Essentially, what black purity means, and a black essentialism means to be black male. Right, the black male is what determines blackness because of the fact, not only because of who we are, but because of white supremacy. White supremacy, the other side of white supremacy, is not black women; it's black men. Right, so that there you go with the outgroup male philosophy. You know, we are the essentialness of what blackness is, and black women don't understand that because they're not the target. They can't be essential black.
Okay. Well, the way we're going to, first of all, let me appreciate that, Ian. Thank you. Shout out to Mississippi Delta guy for that generous donation. Appreciate that. Peace to the brothers. Peace to you as well. Has always been supporting the show, so I want to say thank you for that. I'm going to go to Commander. I'm going to go to Mr. Z. So for Atlanta and Ian, you know, if you want to stay around and add something after that cycle, you're welcome to. If you want to step down, it's all good. I'm going to go for another 20 odd minutes to the 1.5 mark. So just letting you guys know. So let me shift to Commander, Commander Grand Negro Black Knight. Go ahead and break down your observations in regard to this.
I want to say thank you, Brother Tia-san, for Dr. Tia-san. We got to put respect on our doctors and who are in the interests of our people. So I want to give you a salute to that first, because that's very, very important. Second of all, I'm going through something like this personally, legally. I was a Lions Club member for 5+ years. I was a second generation. I created a lineage-based, cultural-based Lions Club for Black American people. It was Black women in our community that shut my organization down, along with white people in Black and brown coalitions against the Black interests of Black American people. I'm in federal lawsuit against these people because of what they have done to me and my organization, my reputation. So when you talk about these things in nonprofit and stuff like that, I'm a firsthand example, and I'm a grad student at JWU. Shout out to them. for nonprofit management. So I run my own nonprofit due to the fact of the harassment that I have experienced on various different organizations. So from some of them from civil rights organizations, from other ones from civic organizations. They claim that they are in the interest of everybody. They claim that they're interests of Black people. And when you have Black people that advocate and try to do projects for them, these are the people that stand against us to this day. Remind you that some of these organizations have racial history specifically towards Black men. So those are some of the things I just wanted to highlight, and just to echo the sentiments of what you were talking about, and also what that brother, the journalist, was talking about. And it's very important that, brother Torraine, it's very important that we respect our brothers that are using their titles and using their position and using their education to uplift our community. It's a reason why I call brother Dr. T. Hasan, because he earned that respect. Being a Black man in higher ed, I understand being in those classrooms, defending your people's honor, standing on Black scholars. That matters. And it does matter where the track record of some of these intellectuals are. What are you writing in these classrooms? Are you writing on behalf of your people, or are you writing some feminist filth so you can get an A+, so you can be a teacher's pet? Bootlicking goes both ways, and bootlicking comes in different forms, including in the academy. So I'm going to just let you know, I'm a designated non-bootlicker around here. And I do call out bootlickers in the academia academy. I don't like it. And I just want to say, brothers like you has given me the terminology and the right weaponry to address those type of conversations and back it up with scholarship. So it does matter who you're getting it from. And it does matter giving the people the respect that they deserve, because they went to hell and back to give you this information. So I just want to say salute to you, brother.
Hey, man, appreciate that. Thanks for dropping the word. Like I said, you guys can hang out after Mr. Z is done. If you have something else you want to add, you're welcome to.
You can let somebody go. Give me about 2 minutes.
He ain't going through it.
Let me piggyback. So, what's up, Mrs. E? So let me piggyback. I think so. Part of the issue, then, which even exasperates it further, is that once Black women get into relationship with these white men, right? Essentially when these white men get in relationship with Black women, they find that the whole mystique of the Black woman is not there. What this whole pro-Black female that they thought that they were going to get, even though when they call themselves pro-Black female, they don't get that. And that becomes the issue in terms of them kind of exaggerating a lot of their looks and their behaviors or whatever, with the white man trying to be more exotic, because what both people find out through self-reflection and self-awareness is that the Black woman is not essentially Black. She does not carry the swag of Blackness that the white man thought that she had. Essentially, she's just a female. She's just a woman, right? She cannot really carry that Black swag, that pro-Blackness, that Black Pantherism, right? Because she's a female. She has to submit to the male, and so that becomes I think a crush to her ego. So she has to exacerbate and she has to exaggerate a lot of her Blackness, because she finds out she's not as Black as she thought, and she understands that the white man realizes the same thing. So what does he need her for? He can go get a white woman. You know what I'm saying? What does he need? A Black woman who's almost essentially white in a lot of her behavior and her views. What does he need her for?
One of the things that I know the Black women have been strategically used to do is to invalidate what Black males say, especially if it goes against the grain of mainstream, whatever's mainstream. And white liberals know this. White liberals know if they stand up and say, to a Black man in this environment that you're wrong for X, Y, and Z reasons, that it looks like they're being racist. So I think Black women have served a very interesting role. Some of these Black women that have been hired into these positions, they serve an interesting role because they're able to invalidate the Black male voice and nobody questions it. It's
Dr.
acceptable.
T,
She's the one to say it. Go ahead, Mr. Z.
what are you saying about Gail King and the Kobe Bryant situation again?
There we go. There we go.
Okay, now I can speak. Okay, thank you for waiting up. Okay, shout out to Torian. I too on my channel have explored this septum ring thing. I haven't gone nearly as deep as Tariq or Torian have, but on my channel have mentioned this also. Wanted to say I'm a little out of breath. My bad. I was like power walking to make sure I could get into a place where it was a little bit more quiet.
Okay.
But you're right. So I want to say to Ian, it's not just about the fact that black men can't give black women the myth of white womanhood. So that's a major thing. Yes, you're absolutely right. Right. And that's the number one thing. But it's also that these particular type of black men see black men as anchors, right? They see them as anchors from achieving the myth of white womanhood, right? So it's not only that you can't give it to her, but you're an anchor, right? From you're an anchor, your blackness is an anchor, right? And the fact that they're associated with black men as being black women, that's what you see much of the movement separating. There's a content creator, black woman, socialist. It's actually in her name, and she herself has said she was like, I don't know why so many radical black women are with white men. And it was like, yeah, because they don't really mean it. They're not anti-patriarchy. They're anti-black patriarchy, right? They're not, and there's so much data that's coming out about women of color in general and like their dating habits. And like everybody's afraid to say like, oops, maybe, everyone's afraid to like kind of investigate, what colonialism and white, hegemony did to the minds of women of color around the planet, particularly in Western countries, right? So like, what did it do to South Asian women, East Asian women, black women, and these are things that we don't investigate. So tying that to the septum ring, I do agree with everyone else that's pretty much saying like it's virtue signaling to white men in particular, not non-black men, white men in particular, right? So there were even Revolt had a like 8-minute long infomercial about black women getting with white men about a month ago, and I want to be very clear: not black women dating and marrying outside of the black race, black women ending up with white men in particular, and that's about power. That's what I'm trying to get to everyone. This is about power. This is about the myth of white womanhood, particularly living I call it a upper middle class, elite or rich white woman's life, right? The teacup dog, the house in the burbs with the white picket fence, the snooty attitude, the expensive clothes, and the septum ring, in many ways is their sign to these particular white men that will have them, right? So, I do think we're dealing with the separation of black men and black women politically in a way that many black people don't actually know how to grapple with. That black men and black women's politics may not be the same because black men don't want to be an off-brand white man, but black women, some but not all, do want that they do want you to be that, and we just got to deal with that. And they want you to be that, and they want to be that. So yeah.
Despite not only assumptions that black men want to be white, and this is an argument that goes back centuries. I mean, you can find this in the Man Not, where even in the 1800s, this was the accusation made against black men that we wanted to emulate white men, and so we see this consistently coming up, even though there's very little evidence to that, if anything. And of course, Dr. Curry debunks a lot of it, but it's nonetheless one of those myths that stays readily available for people to keep reusing to assess black men.
Dr. T.
What does the dating information say? We have more and more online dating information that we don't have to ask you no questions. We just see who you respond to, how you respond to them. We see who you go after. And a lot of online dating statistics, because they can pull that information so readily, right, without you trying to explain things. Now, they might bring you in for an interview after the fact, but we see what women of color are on. And I'm really stressing this wherever I go. Like, this is something, if you want to see balanced families, nuclear black families, and just families in general, there's something to be said about what white patriarchy, how women of color see white men and white patriarchy, and
Mhm.
whether they're truly against it. I mean, Keep It 100 and me say it all the time. There's a reason why, even though Asian men earn the most out of anyone per capita in America, American-born Asian women still marry outside of their race at 54%, primarily to white men. There's a reason for that. And there's a reason why you have divestors screaming at the top of their lungs about a very particular lifestyle that they want to live,
Yeah, they want to be
right?
chosen.
Exactly. But chosen by a very specific type of man. So you can be a black man, you just gonna have to pay the black tax, which means you're gonna have to be rich. Or
And
you can be a middle class white dude, and I'll pause right there. Mhm.
the thing is too, this black essentialism, I think, has to be expounded upon. I don't hear a lot of people saying that. I'll say it. You know what I'm saying? No, nobody else will say it, but I'll say it. The black man is a determining factor of what black is. The black female is not, right? The black female, essentially, she's usually, in terms of when you're talking about the outgroup male and you're talking about two different ethnic groups or races coming together, she's usually the one that's going to fold. She's not going to hold the line in terms of what it means to be black, unless, of course, again, she has this kind of ego trip going on, because she has this jealousy. And I think, when we're talking about the white man, see, the problem is that black women don't understand that it's not about him being white. It's the fact that he's a male. See, black men are not trying to be white, because we know that if we're respected as men, we don't have to be white, right? And that is what these females miss. We're not trying to be white. We're trying to be men, because once we are recognized as men, we have every right and privilege that any race or any other ethnic group has, right? And so, but see, that's not the same. That doesn't go the same for women, because there's a gender difference. There's a what do you I mean essentially, there's a unevenness, there's an unfairness built into the genders. A woman cannot essentially say I am a woman, and that means something. That means squat, right? But if you are a black man, if you go anywhere in the world and you say I am a man, people are gonna take a look at you, right? And so that's part and parcel of what their anger is that they can never be a man. And so I think, to kind of spite us, they kind of highlight the white man and make him bigger. Actually, they're like the daughters of the Confederacy now. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
They're exaggerating the maleness of the white man, and not understanding it, and kind of downplaying the idea that just being a man itself gives you a privilege. You know what I'm saying? Which
Mhm.
is something that we fought for centuries, but we haven't fully achieved.
Absolutely.
Can I
Go ahead.
add something in, Dr. T?
Yeah.
I just want to be brief. One of the things about that septic ring is that it stems from the root of slavery. Um, it has a slavery connotation to it, one way or another. And then on top of that, it has a sexual type of undertone to it. I'm going to go so far as to say I really would like Tariq to touch more about the buck breaking, but from a female aspect. And saying that I look at these are
Yes, yes,
symptoms
yes,
and yeah, I look at
yes.
these are symptoms and behaviors of such ideologies and practices. When I looked at the Buck Breaking documentary, and I have personally on my shelf, and shout out to that brother. I noticed that he focused more on the male aspect, but Buck Breaking was both a male and a female aspect. If you look at the Willie Lynch letters, it goes into very details more about the female psychological aspects of what they'll be experiencing through chattel slavery. So
I think
yeah,
when Tariq Nasheed does talk about it, that's when he starts referring to it as bed winching. To be honest, I played a clip of the one of the videos he did recently because it directly related to Torraine's work, but he started talking about it even in the section I played. So he might go into it more in his radio show than he did in the documentary. I don't know. Maybe the brothers in the comments could tell us for sure. But when he's talking about bed winching, I think that's what he's referring to is the female dynamic in that.
I think what we're getting
But
at
but
is
but but
to
but wait.
my apologies. Wait, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
Can you
sorry.
just
Go
give
ahead.
me 2 seconds? Yeah,
Yeah, go
my
ahead. I'm good.
problem is that he's not talking about the psychological aspect which leads the women into making these type of decisions and these type of relationships.
Okay.
Yes, some of it's rooted in slavery. That is a fact and evident with our people. But when it's expressed in the present day, because of some of the social stressors that we're going through, that is kind of the problems that I'm starting to see right now. Just from I have a minor in sociology, so that's why I'm looking at it from like a sociology perspective. Like, hey, they're playing with our environment, they're playing with policies, and these are the end results. And even in the educational system, that's an environmental change which is affecting the outcome of our people and also the flow of money. So I just want to say that it's very, very structural in nature and very racial by nature. And shout out to you,
Yeah,
But brother, let me say this to
real quick,
you.
Ian.
Oh, go ahead.
What I was saying is what we're describing is essentially being the outgroup woman, right? That's what we have to unpack as black men, black men that want to be with black women, especially if it's in the American context, right? Being the outgroup woman and what they've been sold for the better part of 4 and 5 centuries now, but definitely for me, it's not just going back to slavery and Jim Crow. You add on to that hyper consumerism, you add on to that materialism, you add on to that a neoliberal assessment of masculinity and men. And I think you get to where we are now with women of color in general, with black women being the loudest because they're the furthest back. And then you're watching the moves of other women of color, right? It's not about ex white women out the deal. Look at women of color and how they're speaking and how they're moving, especially black women, obviously with the rhetoric, but like I keep on bringing up East Asian women and South Asian women, and look at the way they move, particularly in the American context. That's why I bring up a person that don't have nothing to do with black, Mindy Kaling, right? Look at her shows. There's a common theme, right? Listen to the way she speak. Listen to the way she speak about South Asian men. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why you're railing against these relationships with Asian women and white men. Colonialism and what it's done, but also materialism, consumerism, and especially in this time that we're living in with status and how women view themselves on that hierarchy when they end up with the chisel chin chat, I guess. And I'll pause right there.
But my thing. So, and I wanted to give some pushback because I don't think it's a trauma response per se. Again, I think it's more of an ego project with them. I think more so because when
I
you're
would agree with
talking
some of
about
that.
because when you're talking about these other males, these women get power through their males, right? And this intersectional feminism has given them this false understanding of the world social paradigm. Like somehow again, as a woman, you can just step out separate from your man and be recognized. Only black women think that they can do that. I think that is the dilemma where they're finding themselves, and to the brother's point, they're finding they're having a nervous breakdown because they're realizing is that they cannot step outside of their man and get the respect that they want. And so essentially, and what they're trying to do is that like they understand, okay, now this the politics of visibility, right? They understand, okay, you have black men getting all this recognition for being killed by the police, and they're realizing, they say, damn, so it's the black man. The black man is the real black one in this situation. So it's not true that black men are the white people of black people. It's actually we are. And I think that becomes a blow to their ego. So essentially, all of this race play is that they're trying to go back and they're trying to replace us as the original black, essentially, right? As the
Imagine
essential
being
black.
jealous of your brother's death.
Yes.
Imagine being jealous that he's the face of black and
Yeah.
he's the one that got murdered. Imagine
Yeah,
that. Wow.
but they're going, but see, they're
Can
going
I
all
add
the
to
way
that?
back to slavery. They're going all the way back to slavery, right? And they're trying to compete during slavery, right? I mean, there was a sister online when I was doing, and I still kind of doing the reparation stuff, but the sister said, you know what, black women suffered more than black men, and I'm like, yo, how? I'm like, and she came out the blue with that shit,
I
right?
didn't
And I mean,
quantify that. Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, well, why are you even saying that to me? You know what I'm saying? Because that wasn't even the context of the conversation that we were having, because the conversation was surrounding. She had posted something with regard to black women were determined whether the children were free or whether they're enslaved, right? And I'm like, okay, see, I said, and my response to that was, I'm like, see, so black men weren't patriarchs as you guys were saying. So I think essentially what they're doing, they're in competition with us to be the essential black.
Power through
Because,
victimization,
yes,
flipping the power dynamic
Hold on.
upside down.
Of course.
Hold on. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give Ian an opportunity to close, but also give his closing thoughts. Then we'll go to Commander, then Atlanta, and we'll finish with Mr. Z, giving your closing thoughts on this. So Ian, continue where you were, but give us your closing thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that becomes the problem here, right? They want to be what white people go to and deal with in terms of what is essentially black. That's where you have the replacement. Yeah, they want that power. They want that ego project, and not only in America, they want that around the world. Because now when they travel around the world, they're finding like, hell, these people really ain't really checking for them around the world either. But they've been sold this cosmopolitan intersectional feminist idea that I am woman, hear me roar, and the rest of the world, you can go and you can just do your little roar, and people are going to be like, oh, there goes a black woman. They're finding out over the decades that is not true, right? People are not recognizing the way that they thought.
So Ian, would you say, if I take what you're saying, what Sergeant Willie Pete is saying in the comment section, would you say that they're looking for not only global validation, but global validation for the gynocracy?
Of course. Yes, of course. That's why you have Tamika Mallory. You have her on one hand being the premier black female civil rights activist, and on the other hand, she's the top NOW, National Organization of Women chairperson, right? At the same time, this is essentially what they're doing. And as Torraine pointed out, there was a sister online who was talking about. Well, let me point this out. There's a sister online who's just been outed because she talked about, if she had a white baby or whatever, how much she would cater to that white baby, and so essentially the problem is that these sisters are coming to a nervous breakdown. I'll land there.
All right, man. Somebody asked where they could catch your writings. So if you want to tell anybody how they can catch up with you, let them know.
You're gonna have to catch me on Twitter. Yeah, you're gonna have to catch me on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? So
going to fisticuffs with them on Twitter.
Yes, yeah. And I do a lot of engagement over there. A lot of my writing is there. I haven't put my writings out. That is the plan. I'm late on getting the YouTube channel, but yes, you can definitely catch me on Twitter. You look up Ian _4G. That's me.
Okay. Appreciate you coming through, man.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys.
All right, man. Peace.
All right, peace.
All right. So who did I say? Was it Commander or Atlanta next?
You said Commander. Doctor. Hey, Dr. T. For how I look at the situation, not to be vulgar, but it's kind of like penis envy. And I look at women from our community are jealous at the spot of where manhood is at, and they want to unseat that. I see that in higher ed a lot, where like I get attacked by both the LGBTQ plus community as well as women community and white women community. Those are like the three prone attack that normally comes consistently in higher ed. White guys like every once in a blue moon and maybe a professor, but it's more or less those three elements from what I've experienced so far in higher ed. And when people say that that you can't advocate for your people, I'm gonna say that's a load of BS. I have a 3.75 GPA advocating, and I have 13 articles to verify what I'm talking about. And I got an A+ average, you know what I mean? So it depends on how you supporting your people, what resources you're using, and how you go about doing that. And if you're not advocating your people in the academy, how can I guarantee that you're going to advocate for us in the real world? How can I advocate and know that you have the intentions of our people when you don't have a proven track record of doing that? I think that we need to raise the bar of standard when it comes to intellectualism in our community, and how we approach these things. And these are just some of the things that I've experienced in higher ed. And I want to say thank you to brothers like you. I wish my father, before he passed, would have met a guy like you. Maybe he would have changed his position on how he treated black boys and black men and a whole lot of other things. I think that he would have been even a more effective leader. But he's dead and gone right now, and it's up for guys like me and other black men to carry on the torch and try to do right by our people and do the right thing. And then it starts in the classroom, and it starts in the mind. So if the man thinketh, so if the man does. And I noticed that a lot of women think and breathe feminism, so therefore they are, unfortunately. So that's just some of the sad realities I do see, good brother. And I want to say thank you again for being who you are.
Well, I appreciate you coming up and dropping a word, and my condolences regarding your father, man.
Salute, good brother.
All right, man. Peace. Atlanta, go ahead and give us your closing thoughts.
I appreciate you, boss man. First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. T. I did buy your book. I wait to get it. I got it off of Amazon, and I appreciate you. I want to say most of you appreciate it, and you're celebrating, brother.
Thank you.
My closing thoughts is like it's kind of like something I was trying to say earlier. What I've been seeing, based upon my studies, because I have a studies in marketing and in business and everything. What I've seen from the very get-go is it's always been about controlling black men's bodies. So with them right now, what I'm seeing from understanding from women, it's all about financial, and also it's all about to point having access. And any way they can get that to point that to where they can actually get in a certain group, they can step on us in the process, because we already know to the point and everything. If you're stepping on a black man's neck, you can make money, and and we've been seeing this for the past 4 decades. So they realize the game, and they're just playing the game. But like I said before, I appreciate you. I thank you guys.
Likewise, man. Thank you very much.
Peace.
Peace. Mr. Z, you got the mic, sir.
Thanks for having me up, Dr. T. And shout out to everyone in the chat.
Pleasure, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Shout out to Sarge in the building, right? Right, one of the OGs. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation about the septum ring and these markers that we're seeing symbolizes something separate and apart from Black uplift in the Black community. As a matter of fact, what we're seeing is that it actually is antithetical to Black uplift. And that's not for all, maybe, but it is something to take notice of. We're going to see more of this, as marriage becomes kind of a status marker for the elite. We're going to see more of this as the white population dwindles. I want to be very clear, just because the white population may dwindle doesn't mean it still won't be influential and powerful. As a matter of fact, there is something to be said, and me and Rogish had this conversation about maintaining the hierarchy of whiteness, where people of color are the ones who maintain it, where the white folks still get to stand on top, because they're still the standard of beauty and access and opulence, extravagance, et cetera, et cetera. And with that, I think you will see from outgroup women these appeals to who they deem as the men on top, the man, right? And that's the white man. You're going to see that from Asian women. It used to be the contacts and blonde hair. Don't forget, Black women weren't the only ones doing that, right? You're going to see, like Tariq was saying, the henna tattoos and et cetera, right? You're going to see septum rings from Black women. You're going to see these things because it's about appealing to these men. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. The people that are anti-patriarchy and railing against patriarchy still wanting patriarchy from a very specific type of man, right? This is also, Dr. Jennifer Lundquist was saying this on an interview, and she's one of the co-authors of the. As a matter of fact, it was also Dr. Chantel Buggs. She was really the one that was saying that, and if I'm not mistaken, she's also one of the authors of the book, The Dating Divide, that there's something about these women that found white men with beards very attractive, right? This is the look, right? And we understand the beard, a symbol of authority and power.
Right.
Like I said, we have to have a serious conversation. And that's why even with Passport Bros, I'm with it. right? But at the same time, we have to have a serious conversation about what did white colonialism do to the minds of women of color around the planet. So yes, you are still a man when you go overseas. They see you as a man,
Yeah.
but who's on top of that man yardstick? Still,
Well,
right?
it's an
You know.
interesting bifurcated dynamic. I've been
Mhm.
watching. Are you familiar with the comedian Big Ja on here on YouTube?
Yeah. The big brother. Yeah.
I've been watching him
Big
for
dark skinned brother. Mhm.
the last few years, just off and on. And shout out
Mhm.
to the brother. He just released a series on Tubi.
Mhm.
That's actually a follow up to stuff he's been doing on YouTube. So he's advancing, and black male
Mhm.
media is advancing. So shout out to
To
him.
the max. Yeah, him.
To the
Yeah.
max. One of the things I see him do a lot is his in his portrayal of black women, they're
Mhm.
usually abusive, hostile,
Mhm. Yeah.
confrontational, the whole kind of deal. And I don't think he's necessarily red pill, but you could correct me.
Mhm.
I'm not familiar with him outside of some of his skits, right?
No, I don't think so.
But I think what we're seeing though is really this imagery that men have actually experienced on the ground coming out in the media, right? And so you're seeing these depictions, and I think what it helps us kind of look at is as you're pointing out, when it comes to white men, there is an adoration for them. That's
Yes.
why we call it zaddy, right? This is zaddy
Mhm.
dynamic. They do venerate white men. They do, in many instances, have no problem with white patriarchy in those relationships, but have a serious issue with black men at every turn. And this is the groups where, the groups of feminists,
Mhm.
septum ring activists we're talking about. But in the black community itself, they want a gynocracy, and they've had one. And to me, I've talked to BGS about this for years. I define a gynocracy as a
Yeah.
black female patriarchy.
Yes.
I look at a gynocracy. So I think it's a bifurcated dynamic where when it comes to patriarchy, it's only acceptable if it's white led,
Mhm.
white male led. And when it comes to the black community itself, it's got to be black female led.
Yes.
Those are the only two patriarchies that are acceptable.
Well, you have content creators online. I'm not gonna mention the white guy's name, but he's married to a black woman apparently, and he
Okay.
says it straight up: peak with peak, peak of the white race, which is white men, with peak of the black race, which is black women.
Mm.
Right? And you get all of the kind of neo-Nazi eugenics talk about black boys and black men from him, obviously,
Oh wow.
et cetera, which his wife endorses, right? So
Mhm.
it's very important that we speak about these are like the breadcrumbs that lead to this environment that we have now, right? When you
Mhm.
have the therapists and black entertainers that make these kind of off-color comments, pun intended, and that lets you know where they stand when it comes to black men, right? And every once in a while it'll leak out. You'll hear it, right? You'll hear black content creators, Sarge is in here. I ain't gonna say her name, but certain people telling you and when they started dating, they were dating outside of their race from the jump,
Mm.
right? But they have a major issue with black men.
Right.
They're all talking colorism, right? So it's just a way of hiding behind activism and the oppression Olympics. It's using oppression Olympics to flip the power structure upside down and then appeal to white men as the group of people that merited their way into white men's hearts. Look, I started from the bottom, now I'm here type talk, right? So that's all it is. And I'll pause right now. Keep you too
But the
long.
real, and Kevin used to
Mhm,
say this all the time, the real
mhm.
measure comes down to marriages. And when you
Yeah.
talk about black women and
Yep.
white men, the reality is white men do not marry black women in any significant numbers.
Yeah.
And I don't think they ever will. Asian women got the best shot of that outside of white women, but outside of that, it's minuscule. And I think
4%, give or take, of black women are married outside. 4% of all marriageable age black women. So when you hear the number breakdown and people say 12%, that's controlling for only married black women, right?
Mm.
But if you count, I think the youngest state, I think it's 16. So that's kind of cringy, but whatever. 16 all the way up, depending on the state, until you pass away. It's about 4-ish% of black women that are married outside of the black race. So, I mean, if you want to put your stake on less than 5%, like if we want to be kind, we can even say 5 or 6%. If we just want to throw in random numbers in there, but and to me, that's not even the important part. The important part is the political project of stepping on black men to appeal to white racist society, particular white men, and that's it for me. But I'll pause right there. Thank you.
And I think the marriages do that on a social level, but it's the same dynamic. But I appreciate you coming up, man, and then tell people what you're doing on your channel, what your channel's about, and what they can expect from you coming up?
What y'all can expect from me is covering this, covering this. Maybe later on tonight, if not tomorrow morning. Thank you, Dr. T, and thank you, Torraine. But number one, number two, more trying to protect the image of Black men. That's my project, right? And that's why I speak about these things the way I do and speak about these people the way I do. I am, got a Black woman. That's what I care about. That's who I'm into. But, at the same time, I will not let our image get drugged through the mud just because you mad you ain't a white woman, right? So that's my project, and that's what I'm about. I'm protecting our image and fighting back against this constant onslaught on our image because somebody mad they don't get to be the spoiled little brat white woman walking around the grocery store with her teacup dog, even though they said no dogs allowed in the store. Anyway, look at Dr. T's face, and I'll pause right there. That's really what it is, right? They jealous of that type of lifestyle. And I'll pause right there.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming through, man. You guys go ahead and support Mr. Z. If you're not subscribed, subscribe over there, support his channel, check him out. He said he's going to be going on later tonight. So definitely look into that. I appreciate y'all coming through on a Saturday night. Give me your thoughts about this. I know on the surface level, it just looks like, this kind of name calling dynamic, but I knew it would go much deeper, and I'm glad it did. At the end of the day, I want to hear especially Black men's thoughts about their experiences with some of the groups we pointed out and what your assessments are on where this is going. All right. So I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good weekend. Enjoy your evening. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.